The town of Red Hollow didn't give a damn about anybody. Dust moved through those crooked streets like it owned the place, settling into every crack, every porch rail, every set of tired eyes that had stopped expecting anything better. The buildings leaned slightly, as if the whole town was drunk or just too exhausted to stand up straight anymore. Men gathered in the saloons arguing about cattle prices and water rights while their wives hurried home before sunset, clutching their shawls tight against the wind that never quite stopped blowing. Nobody trusted anybody. That's what the frontier did to people. It squeezed out everything soft until all that remained was sharp edges and survival instincts. And if you looked weak in Red Hollow, you might as well paint a target on your back. Evelyn Mercer looked weaker than most. Her boots had split open at the seams weeks ago, held together now by strips of cloth she'd torn from her own underskirt. The coat hanging off her shoulders was meant for spring, not the brutal desert nights that dropped temperatures until your bones ached. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones pressing against skin that had lost its color months back. The empty wicker basket dangling from her trembling hand was the only evidence that she'd once believed, really believed, she could still take care of herself. She'd been wrong about that. After the drought killed her father's farm outside of Prescott, Evelyn had wandered from settlement to settlement looking for work, any work, only to discover that hunger frightened people worse than outlaws ever did. Nobody wanted a starving woman around, made them remember how close they all were to the same fate. When she finally stumbled into Red Hollow that October evening, the sun was already bleeding orange across the horizon. Her legs shook with each step. She hadn't eaten in 3 days. Maybe 4. Time got slippery when your stomach stopped bothering to complain. The general store sat at the end of Main Street like a fortress, Silas Grady's Mercantile. Everyone knew the name. Silas controlled half the commerce in the territory, which meant he controlled half the people too. You bought from Silas or you didn't buy at all. You paid Silas's prices or you went without. And if you couldn't pay, well, Silas was happy to extend credit, for a price that never stopped growing. Evelyn pushed open the door. The bell above jangled sharp and metallic. Every head in the store turned toward her at once. Conversations died mid-sentence. A woman near the fabric bolts actually took a step backward, like poverty might be contagious. Behind the counter, Silas Grady looked up from his ledger. He was a thick man, not tall, but solid, with a neck that disappeared into his shoulders and eyes that calculated profit faster than most men could count. His mustache was waxed into points that seemed designed to make him look important. It didn't work. Mostly, he just looked mean. His gaze traveled over Evelyn slowly, taking in the torn boots, the thin coat, the empty basket. His lip curled. "Store's closing," Silas said flatly. Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Please, I just need no credit." He said it loud enough that everyone heard, wanted them to hear. "And no charity for drifters who can't pay their way." Heat flooded Evelyn's face. A few men standing near the potbelly stove snickered quietly. Others looked away fast, pretending to study shelves they'd seen 1,000 times before. Shame was a spectator sport in Red Hollow. "I can work," Evelyn said, hating how desperate she sounded. "I can earn—" "You can leave." Silas turned back to his ledger like she'd already disappeared. "We don't need your kind bringing trouble here." The words hit harder than a slap. Your kind. Like being poor was a choice. Like starving was something she'd done on purpose. Evelyn's hands tightened around the basket handle until her knuckles went white. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw the basket at his smug face and tell him exactly where he could shove his charity. But screaming took energy she didn't have, so she turned around and walked out. The door swung shut behind her. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying dust devils down the street. The sun was lower now, painting everything the color of old blood. Evelyn stood on the porch for a moment, trying to figure out where the hell to go next. There was no next. Red Hollow was the end of the line. She'd run out of towns, run out of chances, run out of everything except the stubborn refusal to just lie down and die already. Across the street, leaning against a hitching post beside a dark horse, stood a man watching her. He was tall, lean in the way men got when they spent more time in the saddle than sitting at tables. His coat was weathered brown leather, scarred and patched in places. Dust covered his boots thick enough that you couldn't tell what color they'd started out. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but Evelyn could feel his eyes on her. She tensed. Men who watched women alone in frontier towns usually wanted something, but this man didn't move, didn't call out, just stood there quiet, like he was thinking about something that hurt. Evelyn looked away first, hugging the empty basket against her chest as she started walking. Didn't matter where, just away. Her vision swam slightly from hunger and exhaustion, but she kept her head up. Wouldn't give this town the satisfaction of seeing her break. Footsteps sounded behind her, heavy boots on wooden planks. Evelyn's heart kicked against her ribs. She walked faster. The footsteps matched her pace, steady and deliberate. She was about to run, though where she'd run to was anybody's guess, when a low voice spoke from just over her shoulder. "Hold on." She spun around. The man from across the street stood a few feet away, one hand raised slightly like he was calming a spooked horse. Up close, his face was weathered and hard, with lines carved around his eyes from squinting into too many sunsets. A scar ran along his jaw. His eyes were gray, the color of winter storms. But there wasn't any threat in them. Just something tired and old that Evelyn recognized because she saw it in her own reflection every time she passed a window. "I'm not looking for trouble," she said quietly. "I know." His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "You're looking for food." Evelyn's throat tightened. She nodded once. The man glanced back toward the general store, where Silas Grady had stepped out onto the porch to watch them. The store owner's expression was smug, satisfied, enjoying the show. When the man looked back at Evelyn, something had shifted in his face. A decision made. He held out his hand. "Give me the basket." Evelyn blinked. "What?" "Your basket." He gestured toward it. "Give it here." She clutched it tighter instinctively. "Why?" "Because I'm going to fill it." The words didn't make sense. Evelyn stared at him, trying to find the angle, the catch, the thing he wanted in return. Men didn't just help for nothing, especially not in places like this. "I don't—" she started. "Come with me," he said simply. Took the basket from her hands before she could protest. "I'll fill your table tonight." The street went quiet. Silas stopped smiling. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting to see what happened next. Nobody helped strangers in Red Hollow. It wasn't how things worked. You looked after your own and let everyone else figure it out. That was the code. The only code that mattered when resources were scarce and kindness was a luxury nobody could afford. But this man, this stranger, was breaking the code right there in the middle of Main Street, where everyone could see. "Who are you?" Evelyn whispered. "Cade Callahan." He said it like the name didn't mean anything, though from the way people were staring, it clearly did. "And you're coming with me before you fall over." He turned and started walking toward his horse. Evelyn stood frozen. Every survival instinct screamed at her not to follow strange men into the desert. She'd heard enough stories, knew what happened to women who trusted the wrong people in the wrong places. But something in Cade's voice had been different. Not pity. Pity always had a performance to it, a look how good I am quality that made Evelyn's skin crawl. This was something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he'd stood exactly where she was standing and knew precisely how it felt. Cade reached his horse and swung up into the saddle in one smooth motion. He looked back at her, waiting. Didn't rush her. Didn't try to convince her. Just waited, holding that damn basket like it was the most important thing in the world. Evelyn looked around. The town watched in silence. Silas Grady's face had gone red with anger at being publicly defied. A few women whispered behind their hands. The men near the saloon shook their heads slowly, already writing her obituary. She had two choices: stay in Red Hollow and starve to death slowly while everyone pretended not to notice, or trust a stranger and maybe die faster. At least the second option involved food. Evelyn walked toward the horse. Cade extended his hand down. She took it. His grip was calloused and strong, and he pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing at all. The horse shifted beneath them, adjusting to the extra weight. "Hold on," Cade said quietly. Evelyn wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of another human being for the first time in months. Her eyes burned with sudden tears that she blinked back hard. Cade clicked his tongue. The horse moved forward. They rode down Main Street slowly while the entire town watched in stunned silence. Evelyn kept her chin up, refusing to look away even as whispers erupted behind them. Let them talk. Let them judge. She was too hungry and too tired to care anymore. As they passed the general store, Silas called out, "She'll rob you blind, Callahan. Mark my words." Cade didn't even turn his head. They left Red Hollow behind as the sun finally dropped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of purple and gold. The town shrank in the distance until it was just a collection of dark shapes against the dying light. Most people believed Evelyn Mercer would never be seen again. A few believed Cade Callahan had finally lost whatever sense he'd been born with. None of them realized they'd just witnessed the beginning of something that would burn the entire territory down. The ride took nearly an hour. They followed a narrow trail through scrub brush and twisted rock formations that looked like sleeping giants in the gathering dark. The temperature dropped fast once the sun disappeared, and Evelyn shivered against Cade's back. He didn't speak, just kept the horse moving at a steady pace. Eventually, the land opened up into a small valley ringed by cottonwood trees. A cabin sat nestled against the hillside. Small and rough, but solid-looking. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin gray line. Home. The word appeared in Evelyn's mind unbidden. She hadn't had one of those in a long time. Cade dismounted and helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. He caught her elbow, steadying her until she found her balance. "Easy," he said. "When's the last time you ate?" Evelyn tried to remember. "Tuesday, maybe. Or Monday. I'm not sure." Cade's jaw tightened, but he didn't comment, just handed her the basket and gestured toward the cabin. "Go inside. Warm up. I'll tend the horse and be right in." She wanted to argue, to insist she could help, but her body had other ideas. The warmth bleeding from the cabin door called to her like a siren song. She stumbled inside. The interior was simple. One main room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner. Cooking pots hung from hooks on the wall. Everything was clean and organized in that particular way of men who lived alone and had learned to take care of themselves. Evelyn sank into one of the chairs and just sat there, soaking in the heat from the fire. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to make them stop. The door opened behind her. Cade came in carrying firewood, which he stacked neatly beside the hearth before shrugging out of his coat. Without it, he looked leaner, harder. The kind of build you got from years of physical labor and not much else. He moved around the cabin with quiet efficiency, adding wood to the fire, pulling ingredients from various shelves and cupboards. Beans, dried meat, flour, an onion that had seen better days. His movements were economical, practiced. "You live out here alone?" Evelyn asked. "Mostly." Cade dumped beans into a pot. "Prefer it that way." "Why help me then?" He paused just for a second before continuing to work. "Because I remember what it's like." What's like?" "Being the person nobody wants to see." The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn studied his profile in the firelight. The scar along his jaw. The way he held his shoulders slightly hunched, like he was used to making himself smaller. There was a story there, she realized. Probably not a happy one. "People talk about you in town," she said carefully. "I heard your name before." "I'm sure they do." Cade added water to the pot and set it on the stove. "People love talking about things they don't understand. They say you survived things, bad things. Surviving isn't the same as winning." He pulled out a knife and started cutting the onion with quick, precise movements. "Sometimes you just live through hell and come out the other side still breathing. Doesn't make you special, just makes you stubborn." Evelyn watched him cook. It was strange seeing a man move around a kitchen like he actually knew what he was doing. Most men she'd known treated cooking like women's work, beneath them somehow. But Cade cooked this way he did everything else, quietly competent, no wasted motion. "Why does Silas Grady hate you?" she asked. Cade's knife paused. "Who says he does?" "I saw his face when you took my basket." "Silas Grady hates anyone who doesn't bow and scrape." Cade resumed cutting. "I don't bow, so he hates me." It seemed like more than that. Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Few years back during the bad drought, Silas tried to corner the grain market, bought up everything he could find and jacked the prices so high that families were going hungry. Some of the ranchers, we pooled resources, bought grain direct from suppliers in Santa Fe and distributed it at cost. He didn't like that." He tried to have me run out of the territory. Cade's voice was flat. Failed. Been a thorn in his side ever since. The beans started to bubble. Cade added the onions and meat, along with some salt and something else Evelyn couldn't identify. The smell hit her stomach like a physical blow. Her mouth watered so intensely it almost hurt. She realized she was crying. Not sobbing, just silent tears running down her face that she couldn't seem to stop. The warmth, the smell of food, the simple act of someone caring whether she lived or died. It was too much. Cade glanced over and saw. He didn't say anything, just turned back to the stove and pretended not to notice while he finished cooking. When he finally placed a bowl in front of her, Evelyn stared at it like it might disappear. Eat, Cade said quietly. Nobody's going to take it from you. She picked up the spoon with shaking hands. The first bite nearly broke her. It was just beans and meat and onions, nothing fancy, but it tasted like the best thing she'd ever eaten in her entire life. She tried to eat slowly to maintain some dignity, but hunger won. She shoveled food into her mouth until the bowl was empty, then looked up to find Cade watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. More? He asked. Evelyn nodded. He refilled her bowl without comment. This time she ate slower, letting her stomach adjust. The shaking in her hands gradually subsided. The fog in her head started to clear. For the first time in months, she felt almost human again. When she finally pushed the empty bowl away, Cade was sitting across from her with his own food, eating in the same quiet way he did everything else. Thank you, Evelyn said. The words felt inadequate. Cade nodded. You can sleep here tonight. I'll take the floor. No, not negotiating. His voice was firm, but not harsh. You're exhausted. Take the bed. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. Evelyn was too tired to argue. Later, lying in Cade's bed while he stretched out on a bedroll near the fire, she stared at the rough wooden ceiling and tried to understand what had just happened. This man, this stranger, had fed her, sheltered her, asked for absolutely nothing in return. In her experience, that didn't happen. Men always wanted something. So what did Cade Callahan want? She was still trying to figure it out when exhaustion finally dragged her under into the first real sleep she'd had in weeks. Morning came cold and bright. Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, which seemed impossible until she remembered where she was. She sat up slowly, muscles protesting. Through the window, she could see Cade outside tending to his horse. She got up and splashed water on her face from the basin, trying to make herself presentable. Her reflection in the small mirror was startling. She barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back. When she stepped outside, Cade looked up from checking the horse's shoes. Morning, he said. There's food inside. I should go. The words came out before Evelyn had really thought them through. You've done enough, more than enough. Cade straightened. Where will you go? I don't know. Find work somewhere. Red Hollow won't hire you, not after yesterday. Evelyn's stomach sank because she knew he was right. By helping her, Cade had made her even more of a pariah. Nobody would risk Silas's anger by giving her work now. Then I'll go somewhere else, she said stubbornly. To do what? Starve in a different town? The blunt assessment stung because it was true. Cade finished with the horse and walked over to her. In the morning light, his face looked older, more weathered, but his eyes were kind. There's a ranch about 10 miles east of here, he said. Iron Ridge. A man named Warren Vance owns it. He's always looking for hands, and he judges people by their work, not their circumstances. Hope flickered in Evelyn's chest. You think he'd hire me? I think he'd give you a fair shot. Cade pulled his hat lower. I can take you there, introduce you. After that, it's up to you to prove yourself. Why would you do that? Cade looked away across the valley. A few years back, I was in a bad way. Wounded, broke, nobody would touch me because of some lies that got spread around. Man I'd never met before gave me work anyway, saved my life. He looked back at her. Figure I owe the world one. Evelyn felt something shift inside her chest. I don't know how to repay you. Don't want repayment. Cade headed toward the cabin. Want you to survive. That's enough. They ate breakfast in companionable silence. Bacon, eggs, bread that Cade had apparently baked himself. Then they saddled up and rode east toward Iron Ridge Ranch. The land opened up as they traveled, rolling hills covered in scrub grass and the occasional stand of trees. Cattle dotted the landscape, grazing peacefully. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Iron Ridge Ranch sprawled across a wide valley, larger than Evelyn had expected. The main house was substantial, built from timber and stone. Barns and outbuildings stretched in various directions. She could see ranch hands working in the distance, moving cattle or mending fences. A man stood on the main house porch watching them approach. Warren Vance was in his 60s, with silver hair and a beard that had seen better grooming. He wore simple work clothes and boots that had been repaired multiple times. His eyes were sharp and assessing. "Cade Callahan," he said as they dismounted. "Don't see you around much anymore." "Been keeping to myself." Cade helped Evelyn down. "Warren, this is Evelyn Mercer. She's looking for work." Warren's gaze moved to Evelyn. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to not look away or shrink back. First impressions mattered in places like this. "You know anything about ranching?" Warren asked. "Some," Evelyn said. "Grew up on a farm outside Prescott. We had cattle, horses, crops. I can ride, can mend fences, can handle livestock." "Why'd you leave?" "Drought killed everything. My father died trying to save it." Warren nodded slowly. It was a story he'd heard before, in various forms. The frontier was full of people running from disasters they couldn't control. "I work my people hard," he said bluntly. "Sun up to sundown, sometimes longer. The work's physical. You'll be sore every night. Some of the hands can be rough around the edges, and I won't tolerate complaining about hurt feelings." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Evelyn said, "and I don't complain." Warren studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at Cade. "You vouch for her?" "I do." "That's good enough for me." Warren turned back to Evelyn. "I'll give you 2 weeks. Show me you can pull your weight, and the job's yours permanent. Wages are fair, room and board included. You'll bunk with the other hands in the south cabin." Relief flooded through Evelyn so intensely she felt dizzy. "Thank you. You won't regret this." "See that I don't." Warren called out toward the barns. "Rodriguez, get over here." A stocky man with a thick mustache jogged over. "This is Evelyn Mercer," Warren said. "She's on trial for 2 weeks. Show her the ropes. Start her on fence work." Rodriguez looked Evelyn up and down skeptically. "Boss, she looks like she'd blow over in a stiff wind." "Then I guess we'll find out if she can hang on," Warren said dryly. "Get to it." Rodriguez shrugged. "Yes, sir. Come on, new girl." Evelyn glanced back at Cade. He gave her a small nod of encouragement. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Cade said. "Thank me when you make it through the 2 weeks." Then he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Evelyn standing in the ranch yard with Rodriguez already walking ahead, not waiting to see if she followed. She hurried to catch up. The next 2 weeks would determine everything. And as Evelyn grabbed the tools Rodriguez shoved at her and headed toward the broken fence line under the brutal midday sun, she made herself a promise. She would survive this, not for Cade, not for Warren Vance, for herself. Because she was done being the woman nobody wanted to see. Starting now, she was going to be someone they couldn't ignore. The fence line stretched for what looked like miles under a sun that had no mercy. Evelyn's hands were already blistering by the time the morning hit its stride. She gripped the post hole digger harder, ignoring the way her palms screamed in protest, and drove the blade into the hard-packed earth, again and again. The ground didn't want to give. Nothing out here wanted to give. Rodriguez worked a few yards away, moving with the kind of easy rhythm that came from doing this 1,000 times before. He hadn't spoken to her since they'd started except to bark instructions. "Dig here, 3 feet deep. Don't slack off." Other ranch hands drifted past throughout the morning, most of them slowing down just long enough to stare. A few muttered comments to each other that Evelyn pretended not to hear. "Give her till lunch." "Nah, she'll be crying by 10. Warren's getting soft in his old age." "Let them talk." Evelyn kept digging. By noon, her shoulders felt like someone had taken a hammer to them. Sweat soaked through her shirt, and the blisters on her hands had opened up and started bleeding. She wrapped them in strips torn from her already ruined underskirt and kept working. Rodriguez finally stopped and looked over at her progress. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Not quite respect. More like surprise that she was still standing. "Water break, he said gruffly. 5 minutes. Evelyn stumbled over to the water barrel and drank until she thought she might be sick. The sun had climbed to its highest point, turning the air into something you could almost see. Heat waves shimmered off the distant hills. A group of ranch hands sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, eating their lunch. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his nose, called out, "Hey, Rodriguez, your new girl make it past breakfast?" "She's still breathing," Rodriguez called back. "I got $5, says she quits before sunset." "I'll take that bet," another voice chimed in. "She looks too stubborn to quit. I say she passes out first." Laughter rolled across the field. Evelyn's face burned, but she kept her head down and drank more water. Proving them wrong would feel better than any comeback she could throw at them. Rodriguez walked over to where she stood. He pulled out a piece of jerky and offered it to her without a word. She took it, too hungry to question the gesture. "They're testing you," he said quietly, "seeing if you'll break or run." "I'm not running." "Good." He bit into his own jerky, because the work gets harder after lunch. He wasn't lying. The afternoon turned brutal. They moved from fence post to stringing wire, which required strength. Evelyn wasn't sure she had any more. Her arms shook with exhaustion. The wire cut into her already damaged hands, drawing fresh blood. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping meant proving every doubter right. Meant proving Silas Grady right when he'd looked at her like she was garbage. Meant proving to herself that she really was as weak and useless as she'd felt standing outside that general store. So she gritted her teeth and pulled wire until her muscles screamed. The sun was finally starting to sink toward the horizon when Rodriguez called it. "That's enough," he said. "Head back to the bunkhouse. Wash up before dinner." Evelyn tried to nod, but her head felt too heavy. She took one step, and her knees buckled. Rodriguez caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy," he said, steadying her. "When's the last time you did physical labor?" "Been a while." Her voice came out hoarse. "No kidding." But there was something almost gentle in his tone now. "You did good today. Better than I expected." "Did I make it past your test?" Rodriguez actually smiled. "You're still here, aren't you? That's more than most. Come on." He helped her walk back toward the cluster of buildings that made up the ranch's living quarters. The bunkhouse was a long, low structure with a covered porch. Inside, rows of simple cots lined the walls. It smelled like leather and sweat and tobacco. A few ranch hands were already there, washing up at the basins or changing into clean shirts. They looked up when Evelyn walked in and the conversation stopped. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "This is Evelyn Mercer. She's on trial for 2 weeks. Anyone gives her trouble, they answer to me. We clear?" A younger man with red hair grinned. "You lost me $5 today." "Yeah, well, I won 10, another man said. "Girls got more spine than sense." "That's not a compliment," the redhead shot back. "Wasn't meant as one." Rodriguez pointed Evelyn toward an empty cot near the back. "That's yours. Dinner's in an hour. Don't be late." Then he left her standing there while the other hands went back to their routines, occasionally glancing her way like she was some kind of strange animal that had wandered into camp. Evelyn sank onto the cot, too exhausted to care about the stairs. Every muscle in her body hurt. Her hands were a mess of blisters and blood. She probably looked like hell and smelled worse, but she'd survived the first day. That was something. She forced herself to get up and wash at one of the basins, scrubbing away the layers of dirt and dried blood as best she could. The water turned brown. Her reflection in the small mirror above the basin was sunburned and hollow-eyed, but there was something different in her expression, something harder. Good. The frontier didn't have room for soft people. Dinner was served in the main ranch house, a long table crowded with ranch hands who ate like they were in a race. Beef stew, cornbread, coffee, strong enough to strip paint. Evelyn sat at the end of the table and ate slowly, letting her stomach adjust to having regular food again. Warren Vance sat at the head of the table, observing everything without seeming to watch. When the meal was winding down, he stood up. "Listen up," he said, and the room went quiet. "Most of you met our new trial hand today. Some of you bet money on whether she'd make it." A few guilty laughs rippled through the room. "She made it," Warren continued, "which means she earned the right to be here tomorrow. Anyone who disagrees can pack their gear and get out. My ranch, my rules." He sat back down, conversation resuming around him. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. Not quite acceptance, but close enough. The evening passed in a blur of exhaustion. She stumbled back to the bunkhouse as soon as dinner ended, barely managing to take off her boots before collapsing onto the cot. Sleep came fast and hard. But morning came faster. Someone was shaking her shoulder while it was still dark outside. "Get up," Rodriguez's voice cut through the fog. "We got cattle to move." Evelyn groaned. Every part of her body screamed in protest as she sat up. Her hands had scabbed over during the night, and the fresh movement cracked them open again. "I gave you easy work yesterday," Rodriguez said, though his version of easy would have killed most people. "Today you earn your keep for real." The cattle drive started before sunrise. Iron Ridge was moving part of their herd to better grazing land about 15 miles north, which meant a full day in the saddle pushing stubborn animals through rough terrain. Warren Vance assigned Evelyn a horse, an older mare named Dancer, who seemed unimpressed with her new rider. "She's steady," Warren said. "Won't spook easy. You know how to handle cattle from horseback?" "My father taught me." "Good. Stay on the left flank with Martinez. Do what he tells you." Martinez turned out to be the scarred man who'd bet against her the day before. He looked even less thrilled about the partnership than Evelyn felt. They rode out as dawn broke across the valley, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. The herd moved slowly at first, reluctant to leave their familiar territory. It took constant pressure from the riders to keep them moving in the right direction. Evelyn found her rhythm quickly. The skills her father had taught her came back like muscle memory. How to read the herd's movement, where to position yourself to guide without spooking them, when to push and when to let them settle. Martinez watched her work for the first hour without comment. Then he edged his horse closer. "You actually know what you're doing," he said, sounding surprised. "I told Warren I grew up on a farm." "Yeah, but people lie all the time." He adjusted his hat. "You weren't lying." "No." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the lowing of cattle and the creak of saddle leather. "I heard what happened in Red Hollow," Martinez said eventually. "Silas Grady's a bastard." Evelyn didn't respond. "Cade Callahan vouching for you, though. That means something around here." "Why?" Martinez spat into the dust. "Because Callahan doesn't vouch for people unless he means it. Man's word is solid, always has been." "You know him well?" "Well enough. He worked this ranch years back, before he went off on his own." Martinez glanced at her. "He saved Warren's son during a bad storm. Kid got trapped in a flash flood, would have drowned if Cade hadn't pulled him out. Warren never forgets that kind of thing." Evelyn absorbed this information quietly. It fit with what little she knew about Cade, the kind of man who helped without expecting anything back. The drive continued through midday heat that made the air shimmer. One of the cows decided she didn't want to cooperate and broke away from the herd, heading for rough country. Martinez swore and spurred after her. "Mercer, cut her off on the left!" Evelyn reacted on instinct, pushing Dancer into a gallop that closed the distance fast. She angled to intercept the runaway cow, reading its movement, timing her approach. At the last second, she cut in front, turning the animal back toward the herd with practiced precision. Martinez let out a surprised laugh. "Hell, girl, where'd you learn to ride like that?" "My father ran a working ranch, not a hobby farm." "No kidding." He grinned at her, and for the first time it wasn't mocking. "You might actually make it here." By the time they reached the northern grazing land, the sun was starting its descent toward the horizon. The herd settled into their new territory without much fuss, and the riders gathered to rest before the long ride back. Someone passed around a canteen of water. Someone else had brought jerky. They sat on the ground in a loose circle, tired but satisfied with a good day's work. Rodriguez appeared with Warren Vance, both of them surveying the herd. "Clean drive," Warren said. "No losses. Good work, everyone." His eyes landed on Evelyn. "Heard you can actually ride." "Yes, sir." "Martinez says you handled that runaway like you'd been doing it for years." "I have been, just not recently." Warren nodded slowly. "Keep this up. You'll have a permanent place here." It wasn't praise exactly, but coming from him, it might as well have been. The ride back to Iron Ridge happened under stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. Evelyn's body ached in new and interesting ways, but it was the good kind of ache, the kind that came from honest work and being useful. For the first time since her father died, she felt like maybe she could build something here. But that fragile hope was about to get complicated, because when they rode into the ranch yard, Cade Callahan was there waiting, and the look on his face said nothing good was coming. Warren dismounted quickly. Cade, what brings you out here this late? Need to talk to you. Cade's eyes flicked to Evelyn briefly before returning to Warren. In private. They disappeared into the main house. Martinez sidled up next to Evelyn as she unsaddled Dancer. Whatever Callahan's here about, it's serious. Man doesn't ride out at night unless something's wrong. What do you think happened? Nothing good. Martinez pulled his saddle off with practiced ease. Probably has something to do with Silas Grady. That man doesn't let grudges go. A cold feeling settled in Evelyn's stomach. 20 minutes later, Warren emerged from the house and called everyone to gather around. Listen up, he said, his voice carrying across the yard. There's been some trouble in Red Hollow. Someone burned down the feed store last night. Murmurs rippled through the assembled ranch hands. Anyone hurt? Rodriguez asked. No, but it's got people spooked. Warren's jaw tightened. Sheriff's calling it an accident, but Cade says otherwise. Cade stepped out onto the porch. In the lamplight, his face looked carved from stone. It wasn't an accident, he said flatly. Someone poured oil around the foundation before lighting it. This was deliberate. Who'd burn down their own town's feed store? One of the hands called out. Someone who wants to send a message. Cade's eyes swept across the crowd. The feed store owner, Marcus Webb, he was one of the men who helped me organize that grain distribution a few years back, the one that undercut Silas's monopoly. Understanding dawned on faces around the yard. Silas did this? Martinez said. That's insane. Maybe, maybe not. Warren crossed his arms. But either way, it means tensions building in Red Hollow. Could spill over into something bigger. Evelyn's hands tightened on Dancer's reins. This was her fault, not directly, but close enough. Silas had been humiliated when Cade helped her. Now he was lashing out. What do we do? Rodriguez asked. We stay alert, Warren said. Double the watch on our supplies. Keep an eye out for anything suspicious. And nobody goes into Red Hollow alone. The crowd dispersed slowly, everyone talking in low voices about what this meant. Evelyn finished with Dancer and was heading toward the bunkhouse when Cade intercepted her. How are you holding up? He asked. Fine. Made it through 2 days so far. Heard you impressed Martinez on the drive. He told you that? Word travels fast on a ranch. Cade's expression softened slightly. You're doing good, Evelyn. Real good. She wanted to feel proud of that, but guilt was eating at her. This is because of me, isn't it? The fire. No? Cade's voice was firm. This is because Silas Grady is a small man with too much power and not enough conscience. He's been looking for an excuse to cause trouble. You were just convenient timing. But if you hadn't helped me, then I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. He put a hand on her shoulder briefly. Don't carry weight that isn't yours, Evelyn. Silas made his choices. You didn't force his hand. Easy to say, harder to believe. Cade seemed to read her thoughts. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. He was right about that. The next week blurred into a relentless cycle of hard work and exhaustion. Evelyn mended more fences, hauled water, broke a young horse that tried to throw her 3 times before finally settling, and spent 2 full days helping repair the barn roof in heat that made her dizzy. Her body adjusted gradually. The blisters on her hands turned to calluses. Her muscles stopped screaming and started just aching. She learned which ranch hands to trust and which ones to avoid. She learned the rhythms of Iron Ridge, when to push hard and when to coast. And slowly, grudgingly, the other ranch hands started treating her less like a curiosity and more like one of them. It was Rodriguez who told her she'd made it. They were working on irrigation ditches one afternoon when he straightened up and looked at her. Your 2 weeks are up tomorrow. Evelyn's heart jumped. She'd been so focused on surviving day to day that she'd lost track. Warren's going to make it official at dinner tonight, Rodriguez continued. But between you and me, you earned it a week ago. Relief flooded through her so intensely she had to blink back sudden tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. You did the work. He wiped sweat from his forehead. Most people quit after 3 days. You never even slowed down. That night at dinner, Warren stood and cleared his throat. Evelyn Mercer's trial period is over, he announced. She's proven she can pull her weight and then some. As of tomorrow, she's a full hand at Iron Ridge Ranch with all the pay and privileges that come with it. Applause broke out around the table, genuine this time, not mocking. Martinez raised his coffee cup. "Welcome to the crew, Mercer." Others joined in. Even the men who'd bet against her were grinning. Evelyn ducked her head, overwhelmed. 2 weeks ago, she'd been starving in the street. Now she had work, had a place, had people who respected what she could do. It felt impossible. After dinner, she walked outside to get some air. The stars were out in full force, and the night was cool enough to feel good after the day's heat. Footsteps approached from behind. "You celebrating?" Rodriguez asked, joining her on the porch. "Trying to believe it's real." "It's real." He leaned against the railing. "You earned every bit of it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Rodriguez said, "Cade came by earlier, asked Warren to pass along a message." "What message?" "Said he's proud of you, and that he knew you'd make it." Something warm bloomed in Evelyn's chest. She hadn't seen Cade since the night he'd warned them about the fire. Part of her had wondered if he regretted helping her, if she'd become more trouble than she was worth. Apparently not. "He's a good man," Rodriguez said. "Doesn't show it obvious, but he is." "I know." "You sweet on him?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. "What? No, he helped me when nobody else would." Rodriguez studied her with knowing eyes. "Right. Well, for what it's worth, Cade doesn't help many people. You must have made an impression." Before Evelyn could figure out how to respond to that, Martinez came running around the corner, moving fast. "Rodriguez, Warren wants everyone in the barn. Now." "What happened?" "Someone just rode in from town. There's been another fire." The cold feeling returned to Evelyn's stomach. They all gathered in the barn. Every ranch hand, Warren, and the messenger, a young man Evelyn didn't recognize. He was out of breath and covered in soot. "Speak," Warren commanded. "It's the church," the messenger gasped out. "Someone torched it around sunset. Whole thing went up. Sheriff's saying it's another accident, but nobody believes that anymore." "Anyone hurt?" Rodriguez asked. "No, thank God. But people are scared. 2 fires in 2 weeks?" The messenger shook his head. "Some folks are saying it's a curse. Others are saying it's Silas Grady trying to consolidate power. Either way, Red Hollow's falling apart." Warren's face was grim. "Where's the sheriff in all this?" "Bought and paid for by Grady. Everyone knows that. He's not going to do anything." Angry mutters spread through the barn. "This is getting out of hand," Martinez said. "We can't just sit here while the town burns." "What do you suggest?" Warren asked. "We're ranchers, not lawmen." "Then we become something else." Martinez looked around at the assembled hands. "We organize, protect our own, make it clear that Silas can't just terrorize the territory without consequences." "That's vigilante talk," someone pointed out. "No, that's survival talk." Warren held up a hand for silence. "I understand the frustration, but we're not starting a range war over this. Not yet." "Then when?" Rodriguez demanded. "After how many more fires?" Before Warren could answer, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the yard. Everyone tensed. Martinez grabbed a rifle from the wall. "That's too fast to be friendly." They poured out of the barn, weapons ready. But it wasn't raiders or troublemakers. It was Cade Callahan, riding hard, his horse lathered with sweat. He pulled up short when he saw the crowd. "What's going on?" "Another fire in town," Warren said. "The church." Cade's jaw tightened. "I heard. That's not why I'm here." "Then what?" Cade dismounted, his movements urgent. "I was in Red Hollow earlier today. Overheard Silas talking to some of his men. He's planning something." "What kind of something?" "Something big. He mentioned Iron Ridge specifically." Cade looked at Warren. "I think he's going to come after you directly." The implications hung heavy in the air. "He wouldn't dare," someone said. "We're too big, too well protected." "He's desperate," Cade countered. "Desperate men do stupid things, and he's got money to hire guns." Warren absorbed this, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at his assembled ranch hands. "Double the watches tonight. Every building gets a guard. Nobody sleeps easy until we know what we're dealing with." "And if he does come?" Rodriguez asked. Warren's eyes went hard. "Then we defend what's ours." The crowd dispersed to their assignments, tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm. Evelyn found herself paired with Martinez on watch duty near the main house. They sat on the porch with rifles across their laps, staring out into darkness that suddenly felt full of threats. "You ever shot anyone?" Martinez asked quietly. No. Hope you don't have to start tonight. Evelyn hoped so too. The hours crawled past. Every sound made her jump. Wind through the cottonwoods, cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of wood settling. Her hands were sweaty on the rifle stock. Around midnight, Cade appeared with coffee. Thought you could use this, he said, handing them each a cup. You not sleeping? Evelyn asked. Not tonight. He settled onto the porch railing, his own rifle close at hand. Too much happening. You really think Silas will attack the ranch? I think he's scared, and scared men with money are dangerous. Cade sipped his coffee. But we'll be ready. They sat together in the darkness, 3 people against whatever the night might bring. Nothing happened. But the tension didn't lift, because everyone knew this was just the beginning. Silas Grady had drawn a line in the sand, and now the whole territory was watching to see who'd cross it first. Dawn came without the attack anyone expected, but the relief was short-lived. Evelyn's eyes burned from lack of sleep as she watched the sun climb over the eastern hills, painting the valley in shades of gold that seemed too beautiful for how ugly everything was becoming. Martinez had dozed off around 4 in the morning, his head tipped back against the porch post, rifle still clutched in his hands. She hadn't had the heart to wake him. Cade was gone. He disappeared sometime before first light without saying where he was going, which seemed to be his way. Warren emerged from the main house looking older than he had the night before. Lack of sleep aged a man fast, and the worry lines around his eyes had deepened into crevices. Anything? He asked. Evelyn shook her head. Quiet all night. That's almost worse. Warren rubbed his face. Waiting's harder than fighting. Martinez jerked awake, nearly dropping his rifle. What'd I miss? Nothing, Warren said. Get some breakfast. I want fresh eyes on watch in an hour. They stumbled toward the dining hall where Cook had already set out coffee and bacon. The other ranch hands filtered in gradually, all of them looking rough. Nobody had slept much. Rodriguez dropped onto the bench next to Evelyn. This is ridiculous. We can't live like this, jumping at shadows. You got a better idea? Martinez asked around a mouthful of bacon. Yeah, we go into town and settle this directly with Silas. And do what exactly? Ask him politely to stop? I was thinking more along the lines of making it clear what happens if he doesn't. Warren overheard and turned from where he stood near the stove. Nobody's doing anything until we know more. Cade's gathering information. When he gets back, we'll decide our next move. And if Silas moves first, Rodriguez pressed, then we respond. But I won't start a war based on fear and rumors. The conversation died there, though the tension didn't. Evelyn picked at her food, appetite gone. She kept thinking about that night in Red Hollow when Cade had taken her basket. Such a simple gesture, helping one starving woman. Now it was spiraling into something bigger than either of them had imagined. You okay? Martinez asked quietly. Fine. You're a terrible liar. Evelyn set down her fork. I just keep thinking this is my fault. We already talked about this. It's not. But if Cade hadn't helped me, also, then you'd be dead in a ditch somewhere, and Silas would have found some other excuse to be a bastard. Martinez leaned closer. Men like him don't need reasons. They make excuses. There's a difference. Before Evelyn could respond, one of the younger hands burst through the door, breathing hard. Riders coming in. 4 of them. Everyone was on their feet instantly, hands moving toward weapons. Warren strode outside with half the ranch following. Evelyn grabbed her rifle and joined them, heart hammering against her ribs. 4 horses were indeed approaching, but as they got closer, the tension eased slightly. These weren't Silas's hired guns. They were ranchers from neighboring properties. Evelyn recognized 2 of them from the cattle drive. The lead rider was a woman in her 50s named Sarah Brennan, who ran a spread about 20 miles south. Her face was hard as granite. Warren, she said, not bothering with pleasantries, we need to talk. They gathered in Warren's office. Sarah, 2 other ranchers named Coleman and Briggs, Warren, Rodriguez, and Martinez. Evelyn started to leave, but Warren gestured for her to stay. You're part of this whether you like it or not, he said. Might as well hear it all. Sarah didn't waste time. Silas came to see me 2 days ago, made an offer to buy my land. You selling? Warren asked. Hell no. But he wasn't really asking. Her jaw tightened. He said things are going to get difficult in the territory. Dangerous, even. Said it'd be safer for everyone if the smaller operations consolidated under his protection. Coleman, a weathered man with white hair, snorted. He tried the same thing with me, called it practical business. I called it extortion. He's making his move, Briggs added. He was younger, maybe 40, with the nervous energy that kept his hands moving. Buying up the territory piece by piece. Anyone who doesn't sell gets squeezed out. Warren leaned back in his chair. The fires. Exactly. Sarah's expression was grim. He's creating chaos to drive down property values and scare people into selling. Classic land grab. Rodriguez slammed his fist on the desk. We can't let him do this. What choice do we have? Briggs asked. Sheriff won't help. No law out here except what we make ourselves. Then we make our own law, Coleman said. We band together. Present a united front. Against what? Sarah challenged. Silas has money, can hire as many guns as he needs. We're ranchers, not an army. The room fell silent as that reality settled over everyone. Evelyn spoke up without really meaning to. What if we don't fight him directly? All eyes turned to her. What do you mean? Warren asked. She scrambled to articulate the thought forming in her head. Silas's power comes from controlling commerce, right? He owns the store, the feed operation, the supply lines. People depend on him because they have no choice. We know this already, Sarah said, not unkindly. But what if they had a choice? Evelyn looked around the room. What if we created an alternative? A way for families to trade and barter without going through Silas at all? Martinez caught on first. Like what Cade did with the grain distribution. Bigger than that, Evelyn said, warming to the idea. A regular trading fair, monthly maybe, where ranchers and farmers can exchange goods directly. Livestock, crops, supplies, labor. Cut Silas out of the equation entirely. Coleman stroked his beard thoughtfully. That could work. If enough people participated, they would, Sarah said slowly. People are desperate for an alternative. They just need someone to organize it. And protection, Briggs added. Silas won't let this happen without a fight. So we protect it, Rodriguez said. All of us. Every ranch contributes hands to keep the peace. Warren was quiet, thinking it through. Then he looked at Evelyn. This was your idea. You willing to help make it happen? The question caught her off guard. I'm just a ranch hand. You're someone who sees solutions instead of just problems. That's rare. Warren stood. I'm willing to try this, but it'll take work, organization, and we'll need to move fast before Silas realizes what we're doing. Sarah nodded. My ranch will participate. Coleman? I'm in. Briggs? The younger rancher hesitated, fear clear on his face. Then he squared his shoulders. Yeah, I'm in too. They spent the next 2 hours hammering out details. The first trading fair would happen in 3 weeks at a neutral location, a wide meadow halfway between Iron Ridge and Sarah's ranch. Every participating property would spread the word, invite families who'd been struggling under Silas's monopoly. They'd need wagons, security, some kind of organization to keep things from descending into chaos. It was ambitious, maybe impossible, but it was something. When the other ranchers finally left, Warren pulled Evelyn aside. You just painted a target on your back, he said quietly. You know that, right? It was already there. Fair point. He almost smiled. But this is different. If Silas finds out you're behind this idea, he'll come for you specifically. Let him try. The words came out harder than Evelyn intended. I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of watching cruel people win because everyone's too scared to stand up. Warren studied her for a long moment. You've changed a lot since you got here. Had to. The old me wouldn't have survived. Maybe not, but don't lose all of her. His voice was surprisingly gentle. World needs people who still remember how to be kind. He left her standing there, unsure how to feel about that. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Word spread quickly through the ranch hands, and opinions were split. Some thought the trading fair was brilliant. Others thought it was suicide. Martinez fell firmly in the brilliant camp. This could actually work. If we pull it off, we break Silas's stranglehold on the territory. And if we don't, one of the other hands asked, then we're probably dead anyway, so might as well go down swinging. Not exactly comforting, but hard to argue with. Cade returned just after sunset. his horse exhausted and his face set in hard lines. Warren met him in the yard and they disappeared into the office. 20 minutes later, Warren called everyone to gather. "Cade's got news," he announced. "None of it good." Cade stepped forward. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Silas knows about the trading fair." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "How?" "Briggs." Cade's voice was flat. "He went straight to Silas after leaving here. Told him everything in exchange for protection and a good price on his land." Curses exploded around the yard. "That coward," Rodriguez spat. "I knew he looked nervous." "Doesn't matter now," Warren said. "What matters is what we do next." "Silas is planning to disrupt the fair," Cade continued. "He's hiring guns, planning to ride in and shut it down by force." "Then we cancel," someone said. "Not worth getting people killed." "No." Evelyn surprised herself by speaking up. "That's exactly what he wants, for us to be too afraid to try." "She's right." Sarah's voice came from the back. The female rancher had stayed behind when the others left. "We cancel now. We're admitting defeat before we even start." "We could all die," another hand pointed out. "We could," Kate agreed. "Or we could win. Build something that actually helps people instead of exploiting them." The crowd murmured, uncertain. Warren raised his voice. "I won't order anyone to participate. This has to be voluntary. Anyone who wants out, say so now. No judgment." Silence. Then Martinez stepped forward. "I'm in." Rodriguez joined him. "Me too." One by one, the ranch hands committed, even the ones who looked terrified. Sarah smiled grimly. "Looks like you've got your army, Warren." "We're not an army," Warren corrected. "We're ranchers who've had enough." Over the next 3 weeks, the territory transformed into something between a military operation and a barn raising. Ranches coordinated schedules, shared resources, planned logistics. Families who'd been barely surviving under Silas's thumb heard about the fair and started preparing goods to trade. Hope spread like wildfire. But so did fear. 2 more fires broke out in Red Hollow. A family-owned tannery burned to the ground, then a boarding house. The sheriff continued calling them accidents, but nobody pretended to believe that anymore. Silas was sending a message: "Oppose me and burn." Evelyn threw herself into the work, helping coordinate supply lists and trying to anticipate what people would need. She rode between ranches carrying messages, learning the territory, meeting families who looked at her with desperate hope that she wasn't sure she could fulfill. One afternoon, she found herself at Sarah Brennan's ranch going over inventory when Sarah stopped and looked at her directly. "You know what you've started, don't you?" "A trading fair." "A revolution." Sarah's eyes were serious. "That's what this is. You're challenging the entire power structure of the territory." "I just wanted to help." "I know, that's what makes it powerful." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "But power doesn't give itself up peacefully. When that fair happens, blood's going to spill. You ready for that?" Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, starving and humiliated outside Silas's store. That woman would have run. "I'm ready," she said. She hoped it was true. The night before the fair, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling while the other ranch hands snored around her. Tomorrow would decide everything. Either they'd succeed and prove that ordinary people could build something better, or they'd fail, and Silas would crush any hope of change for years to come. No middle ground. She finally gave up on sleep and walked outside. The stars were brilliant, cold and distant. A figure stood near the corral, and she recognized Cade's silhouette. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, approaching. "Never can before a fight." "You think it'll come to that?" Cade turned to face her. In the starlight, his features were all shadows and plains. "Silas is bringing guns. What do you think?" "I think people are going to get hurt because of an idea I had." "People are already hurt. You're giving them a chance to fight back." He paused. "That's worth something." Evelyn leaned against the fence. "You ever regret helping me that day?" "No." "Not even a little? This whole situation was inevitable," Cade interrupted. "Silas has been building toward this for years. You didn't cause it. You just gave people a reason to finally do something." Martinez said something similar. "Martinez is smart." Cade was quiet for a moment. "You know, when I saw you outside that store, I saw myself. 10 years ago, after the cattle war, broken, starving, alone. I thought I was going to die out there. What changed? Someone helped me. Didn't ask for anything. Just helped because it was the right thing to do. He looked at her. I've been trying to pass that forward ever since. Most people don't make it easy. But you did. I didn't do anything except survive. That's harder than it sounds. Cade's voice was soft. Most people give up. You didn't. You fought for every inch. That's why I knew you'd make it here. Why I knew you'd come up with something like this fair. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. If tomorrow goes wrong, it might. Then I want you to know I'm grateful for everything. Cade was quiet for so long she thought he might not respond. Then he reached out and squeezed her shoulder briefly. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to be hell. He walked away, leaving Evelyn alone with the stars and her fears. Morning came too fast and too bright. The ranch exploded with activity as everyone prepared to move out. Wagons were loaded with goods for trade. Rifles were cleaned and ammunition distributed. Warren gave a brief speech about staying calm, avoiding violence if possible, but being ready if it wasn't. Then they rode out. The meadow chosen for the fair was beautiful in a stark frontier way. Rolling grass, scattered trees, a creek running along one side. By the time Iron Ridge arrived, dozens of wagons were already there. Families set up temporary stalls, displaying everything from preserved foods to handmade tools to livestock. The atmosphere was strange, half celebration, half preparation for war. Evelyn helped organize the layout, directing wagons to create a rough circle with space in the middle for people to move and trade. Children ran between the stalls, excited by the novelty. Their parents watched the horizon nervously. Everyone knew Silas was coming. The question was when. By midday, the fair was in full swing. The trading was brisk, people exchanging goods with genuine joy at not having to go through Silas's inflated prices. An impromptu band started playing fiddle music. Someone started roasting meat over a fire pit. For a few hours, it felt almost normal. Evelyn was helping a young mother negotiate a trade for fabric when Martinez appeared at her elbow. Riders, he said quietly. East Ridge. Her blood went cold. How many? 20, maybe more. All around them, other ranch hands were getting the same message. Men casually moved to positions around the perimeter, trying not to alarm the families, but clearly preparing for trouble. Warren found Evelyn in the crowd. Get the women and children to the center, behind the wagons. They'll panic. Better panicked and alive. Evelyn started moving through the crowd, quietly telling mothers to gather their children. Some understood immediately. Others resisted until they saw the men taking positions with rifles. The music stopped. The riders appeared on the eastern ridge like a dark stain spreading across the landscape. Even from a distance, Evelyn could see they were armed. Heavily. Silas Grady rode at the front, flanked by hired guns who looked like they killed people for a living. The fair went silent as everyone turned to watch them approach. Silas stopped about 50 yards out. Close enough to be heard, far enough to be safe if shooting started. He was dressed in his usual suit, completely out of place on the frontier, but clearly chosen to emphasize his wealth and power. This is an illegal gathering, he called out. His voice carried across the meadow. You're trespassing on land I've purchased rights to. Disperse immediately. Warren stepped forward. This is open territory, Silas. Nobody owns this land. I have papers that say otherwise. Papers you probably forged. Silas's face reddened. You're making a mistake, Vance, all of you. I'm offering one last chance to go home peacefully. And if we don't, Sarah Brennan called from the crowd, then you'll force me to clear this rabble by whatever means necessary. One of the hired guns spat tobacco juice and grinned. These men weren't here to negotiate. They were here to hurt people. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Around her, families huddled behind wagons, frightened but refusing to run. They'd come too far to back down now. Cade appeared next to Warren, his rifle held loose but ready. You really want to do this, Silas? Start a shooting war with families present? I want these people to understand who controls this territory. Silas's voice was tight with rage. You've been a thorn in my side for years, Callahan. You and your bleeding heart. Time to learn that compassion doesn't pay bills. Neither does burning down half the town, but that didn't stop you. Silas's eyes narrowed. Careful with accusations you can't prove. I can prove it, a new voice called out. Everyone turned. A man was walking toward them from the road. Middle-aged, disheveled, carrying what looked like a ledger. Evelyn didn't recognize him, but Silas clearly did. His face went white. "Marcus," Silas said, "what are you doing here?" Marcus Webb, the feed store owner whose business had burned. He looked like he hadn't slept since. "Telling the truth," Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "about what you did. About what you've been doing for years. You're confused. The fire was arson. We both know it." Marcus held up the ledger. "And I've got your books here to prove it. Every shady deal, every threat, every family you've squeezed dry. Your own records, Silas, the ones you thought burned in the fire." Silas's expression shifted from shock to cold fury. "You stole from me. I saved evidence." Marcus looked at the assembled crowd. "He's been planning this for months, buying up the territory, getting rid of anyone who wouldn't sell. The fires were just the beginning." One of the hired guns moved his hand toward his weapon. Cade's rifle came up instantly. "Don't!" Suddenly everyone was armed and aiming at someone. The hired guns versus the ranchers. 20 armed mercenaries against maybe 30 people who actually knew how to shoot. Bad odds, either way. Evelyn's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The silence stretched thin as wire. Then one of the hired guns made his choice and drew. All hell broke loose. The gunshot cracked across the meadow like lightning splitting stone. Evelyn hit the ground behind a wagon wheel as chaos erupted around her. More shots followed, a staccato explosion of rifle fire from both sides. Women screamed, children cried, horses shrieked and bolted. The peaceful trading fair transformed into a battlefield in seconds. She pressed herself flat against the wagon bed, trying to make herself small, while bullets tore through canvas and splintered wood above her head. Her rifle was somewhere. She dropped it when she dove for cover. Her hand scrabbled in the dirt trying to find it. "Stay down!" Rodriguez's voice shouted from somewhere close. "Don't move unless you got a clear shot." More gunfire. The acrid smell of powder smoke filled the air, mixing with dust kicked up by panicked horses. Through the chaos, Evelyn could hear Warren bellowing orders, trying to organize the defense. She finally found her rifle and pulled it close, checking the chamber with shaking hands. She'd never shot at a person before. Never even imagined she'd have to. A hired gun appeared around the edge of the wagon, his pistol raised. Evelyn fired without thinking. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. The bullet went wide, missing him by at least 2 feet, but it was close enough to make him duck back behind cover. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely reload. "Evelyn!" Martinez appeared next to her, blood running down his arm. "You hit?" "No. You?" "Just a graze. Listen, we need to get the families out of here. This is going to get worse before it gets better." He was right. The hired guns had position on the ridge and better weapons. They could pin down the ranchers and pick them off methodically. "Where's Warren?" Evelyn asked. "Organizing a counter. We're going to try to flank them, drive them back." Martinez grabbed her shoulder. "I need you to help get people to the creek. There's cover there, trees, rocks, better than these wagons." "What about you?" "I'm going with Warren." He pressed a spare ammunition pouch into her hands. "Now move." He was gone before she could argue. Evelyn scrambled across the ground to where a group of women huddled with their children behind an overturned table. One of them was the young mother she'd helped earlier, clutching her infant while tears streamed down her face. "We have to move," Evelyn said urgently. "The creek. Can you run?" "I can't, my baby. I'll cover you, but we have to go now." Another volley of shots tore through the air. One of the wagons caught fire, flames licking up the canvas covering. Black smoke billowed into the sky. "Now!" Evelyn shouted. The women ran, clutching their children. Evelyn followed behind, firing blindly toward the ridge to keep the hired guns' heads down. She had no idea if she hit anything. Didn't care. Just needed to buy enough time. They made it to the creek line and dove into the cover of cottonwood trees and rocky outcroppings. Other families were already there, pressed low against the ground. Sarah Brennan crouched behind a boulder, her rifle steady, despite blood running down her face from a cut above her eyebrow. "How bad?" Evelyn asked, dropping next to her. "I've had worse." Sarah fired twice, precise and controlled. "But we're outnumbered and outgunned. This was a trap." "Briggs." "Yeah, Silas knew exactly when and where to hit us." Sarah's voice was bitter. "And we walked right into it." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The ranchers fought hard, but the hired guns had the advantage. They were professionals, paid to kill, and they were good at their jobs. Then everything changed. A new sound cut through the gunfire. Hoofbeats. Lots of them. Everyone paused, confused. Were more of Silas's men arriving? But the riders that appeared came from the west, not the east. At least 40 of them, maybe more. And leading the charge was Cade Callahan, his rifle raised high. Behind him rode ranchers from properties all across the territory, people who'd gotten word about the attack and came running. Men and women who were tired of Silas's stranglehold, who'd heard about the trading fair and what it represented. They slammed into Silas's hired guns like a hammer. The tide turned instantly. The mercenaries weren't prepared to fight a full-scale assault. They'd come to intimidate and scatter frightened families, not face organized resistance. When Cade's reinforcements hit their flank, the hired guns broke. Some threw down their weapons and surrendered. Others tried to run and got cut off. A few died fighting, too stubborn or too stupid to quit. Within minutes, it was over. The meadow fell silent except for the moans of the wounded and the crackling of burning wagons. Smoke drifted across the scene like ghosts. Evelyn stood on shaking legs, looking at the carnage. Bodies lay scattered across the grass. She counted at least 5 dead, maybe more. Dozens wounded. The peaceful trading fair had become a graveyard. She felt sick. Warren was shouting orders, organizing care for the wounded. Rodriguez moved among the injured, doing what he could with bandages and whiskey. The families who'd hidden by the creek emerged slowly, children crying, parents checking frantically for missing loved ones. And in the middle of it all stood Silas Grady. He dismounted during the fight, trying to flee on foot when his hired guns scattered, but he hadn't gotten far. Now he stood surrounded by angry ranchers, his expensive suit torn and dirty, his face pale with fear. Cade walked toward him slowly, rifle still in hand. "It's over, Silas," he said quietly. "You can't prove anything." Silas's voice shook. "This was just a misunderstanding. My men got overzealous. Your men attacked innocent families." Warren stepped forward, his face like carved granite. "And Marcus Webb's got your records. Every crime, every deal, every threat, all of it documented in your own handwriting." Silas looked around desperately, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The crowd pressed closer, their rage palpable. These were people who'd lost homes, businesses, family members to his greed. They wanted blood. "Someone get the sheriff," Sarah called out. "Let the law handle this." "The law?" Someone in the crowd laughed bitterly. "The sheriff's in Silas's pocket. There is no law out here." "Then we make law," Warren said firmly. "We do this right. No lynching, no frontier justice. We hold him until we can get a federal marshal out here." "That could take weeks." "Then it takes weeks." Warren's voice was steel. "We're trying to build something better here. That doesn't start with murder." The crowd grumbled but didn't argue. Warren Vance's word carried weight. 2 ranch hands tied Silas's wrists and led him toward one of the intact wagons. He went without resistance, all the fight drained out of him. Without his money and hired guns, he was just a small, frightened man who'd finally run out of power. Evelyn watched him go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just exhaustion and grief for everything this day had cost. She turned away and nearly walked straight into Cade. "You okay?" he asked. "No." The word came out before she could stop it. "I'm not okay. People died today because of an idea I had. People died because Silas Grady would rather burn the world than share it." Cade's voice was gentle but firm. "Don't carry his weight." "How many?" "Dead? 5 of his hired guns, 2 of ours, Coleman and a young hand from Sarah's ranch. Maybe a dozen wounded seriously enough to need a doctor." Evelyn closed her eyes. Coleman, the weathered rancher with white hair who'd committed to the fair without hesitation. Dead now because he'd dared to stand up. "I need to sit down," she said. Cade guided her to a fallen log near the creek. She sat heavily, her legs finally giving out. Around them, people worked to clean up the devastation, putting out fires, tending wounded, gathering the dead. "I thought we were doing something good," Evelyn said quietly. "Helping people." "You did. You are." "Then why does it feel like this?" Cade sat next to her. "Because doing good things costs something. Always has. You think the people who fought for independence didn't watch their friends die? You think anyone who ever challenged tyranny didn't pay in blood? That's different. No, it's not. He looked at her directly. What you started here matters, Evelyn. You gave people hope, showed them they don't have to accept cruelty as the way things are. That's worth fighting for. Is it worth dying for? Coleman thought so. He told me last week that this fair was the first time in years he felt like he was building something instead of just surviving. Cade's voice was rough. He knew the risks, chose to be here anyway. Evelyn wanted to argue, to push back against the guilt crushing her chest, but exhaustion won. She just sat there staring at the smoke-stained sky. Martinez appeared, his arm properly bandaged now. Warren wants everyone who can still ride to help transport the wounded back to Iron Ridge. We'll send runners to other ranches for supplies and a doctor. I'll help, Evelyn said, standing. You sure? You look like you're about to fall over. I'm sure. The ride back to Iron Ridge was grim and slow. The wounded were loaded onto wagons, groaning with every bump in the rough road. The dead were wrapped in canvas and strapped to horses. Families who'd lost loved ones rode in stunned silence. It took hours. By the time they arrived at the ranch, night had fallen. Warren had sent riders ahead, and the place was already prepared, the dining hall converted to an infirmary, fresh bandages and medicine laid out, fires burning for hot water. Evelyn worked through the night helping where she could, holding down screaming men while Rodriguez dug out bullets, comforting crying children, washing blood from cloths so they could be reused. Somewhere around midnight, she stepped outside for air and found herself bent over, dry heaving from exhaustion and horror. A hand touched her back. Sarah stood there looking equally wrecked. The cut above her eye had been stitched, leaving her with a fresh scar. First battle? Sarah asked. Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. It doesn't get easier, Sarah said. Anyone who tells you it does is lying. You just get better at carrying it. I don't want to carry this. Too late. It's yours now. Sarah wasn't cruel, just honest. But here's what I learned a long time ago. You can carry weight for nothing, or you can carry it for something that matters. At least this mattered. She walked back inside, leaving Evelyn alone with the stars and her grief. The next morning brought news from Red Hollow. The town had erupted after word spread about the battle and Silas's capture. His store had been ransacked, his house set on fire, intentionally this time, by people who'd suffered under his control for years. The sheriff had disappeared, probably running before the same angry mob turned on him. Red Hollow was free of Silas Grady's grip, but it was also chaos. Warren called a meeting of everyone who could walk. They gathered in the barn, ranchers, ranch hands, families who'd stayed at Iron Ridge for safety. We've got a problem, Warren announced. Red Hollow needs leadership, needs organization. Right now it's just angry people burning things, and that'll turn bad fast. Not our problem, someone muttered. It is our problem, Sarah countered, because if Red Hollow falls apart completely, the chaos spreads. We need that town functional. So what do you suggest? Warren looked around the room. We form a council, representatives from the major ranches and the town. Make decisions together, rebuild the commerce we destroyed. With what? Silas owned everything. Then we build new everything. Warren's voice was firm. The trading fair proved people want an alternative. So we make it permanent. Turn that meadow into a regular market. Create supply lines that don't depend on one man's greed. Martinez spoke up. That's a massive undertaking. We're talking about restructuring the entire territory's economy. You got a better idea? Silence. Then Evelyn stood. Everyone turned to look at her. The fair worked because people trusted it, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. They trusted that it was trying to help them, not exploit them. If we're going to rebuild, we have to maintain that trust. How? Sarah asked. Transparency? Fair prices? No one person controlling everything. Evelyn looked around the room. We make it a cooperative. Everyone who participates has a say. Everyone benefits equally. The idea hung in the air. That's never been done before, Rodriguez said. Not out here. Most things worth doing haven't been done before, Warren replied. He looked at Evelyn. You willing to help organize this? Me? I'm just someone who sees possibilities. Warren cut her off. Someone people are starting to trust, like it or not. You've become a symbol. Might as well use that. Evelyn wanted to refuse, wanted to go back to being anonymous, just another ranch hand doing her work. But she looked around at the faces watching her, people who'd fought beside her, who'd risked everything for a chance at something better. "I'll help," she said. The council formed quickly. Warren, Sarah, representatives from 3 other major ranches, the mayor of Red Hollow, who'd always hated Silas but been too intimidated to act, and Evelyn. They met daily, hammering out details. It was exhausting work. Every decision sparked arguments. Every plan had a dozen complications. People who'd never had a voice suddenly wanted to use it constantly. Resentments that had simmered for years boiled over. But slowly, gradually, something started to take shape. They established the permanent trading market, setting fair rules and prices. They created a rotating security force from the ranches to keep the peace. They redistributed Silas's seized properties to families who'd been displaced. And most importantly, they started building trust. It wasn't perfect. Arguments broke out. Some people tried to take advantage. Old grudges surfaced. But for the first time in years, the territory felt like it was moving forward instead of just surviving. Evelyn threw herself into the work, partly because it needed doing, and partly because staying busy kept her from thinking about Coleman and the others who'd died. She helped organize supply chains, mediated disputes, learned more about commerce and politics than she'd ever wanted to know. Cade appeared occasionally, helping where needed but never staying long. He'd never been comfortable with crowds or attention, and his role as the man who'd saved the fair made him something of a legend. People wanted to shake his hand, thank him, buy him drinks. He hated all of it. One evening, Evelyn found him sitting alone by the creek where the battle had happened. The bloodstains were gone now, washed away by rain. But the scars remained. Bullet holes in trees, disturbed earth where bodies had fallen. "You avoiding people?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Always. They want to thank you, you know. You saved a lot of lives." "I didn't save enough." His voice was flat. "Coleman's still dead. So's that kid from Sarah's ranch. So are 6 others. You can't blame yourself for that." "Sure I can. I brought the reinforcements too late. If I'd gotten there 30 minutes earlier, then maybe more people would have died, maybe less. Maybe nothing would have changed." Evelyn looked at him. "You can't carry every death, Cade. It'll break you." Speaking from experience, learning from it. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the creek burble over stones. "You're good at this," Cade said eventually. "The organizing, the politics. People listen to you." "I'm terrified every time I open my mouth. Doesn't show." "I'm a good liar then." Cade almost smiled. "You're a good leader. There's a difference." Evelyn shook her head. "I'm not a leader. I'm just someone who got tired of watching bad people win." "That's what leaders are," Cade said. "People who refuse to accept how things are and fight for how they should be, whether they want the title or not." She didn't know how to respond to that. "The territory's changing," Cade continued. "What you started at that fair, it's bigger than anyone expected. People are talking about it all the way to Santa Fe. Other towns want to try the same thing. That's good, right?" "It is, but it also makes you a target." He looked at her seriously. "Silas wasn't the only man with money and power in this territory. Others are watching what happened here. Some of them won't like it. Let them not like it." "I'm serious, Evelyn. You've painted yourself as a threat to anyone who profits from exploitation. That's a dangerous position. So what do you suggest? I stop? Let everything go back to how it was?" "No." Cade's voice was firm. "I suggest you be careful. Watch your back. Don't assume the fight's over just because Silas is gone." "Is that what you're doing? Watching my back?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The federal marshal finally arrived 3 weeks after the battle. He was a weathered man named Pike, who'd seen too much frontier justice to be surprised by anything. He listened to statements, reviewed Marcus Webb's ledgers, interviewed witnesses. The evidence against Silas was overwhelming. "He'll hang," Pike said bluntly. "Maybe not immediately. He's got money for lawyers, but eventually he'll hang." They transported Silas to Santa Fe under armed guard. He went quietly, all the arrogance drained out of him. The man who'd terrorized an entire territory looked small and old and broken. Evelyn watched the wagon carry him away and felt nothing. Red Hollow threw a celebration that night. The The whole town turned out, music and dancing and more food than anyone had seen in years. The trading market's success meant people could actually afford to feed themselves properly. Evelyn stood at the edge of the festivities, watching families laugh and children play. 3 months ago, she'd been starving in these same streets. Now people smiled when they saw her, asked her opinion, trusted her to help build their future. It was surreal. Martinez appeared with 2 cups of something that smelled strongly of whiskey. You celebrating? Trying to? But? I keep thinking about the cost. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Coleman told me something the day before he died. He said he'd lived his whole life afraid of Silas, afraid of drought, afraid of losing everything. Then the fair came along, and for the first time he felt like fear didn't have to win. He still died. Yeah, but he died fighting for something instead of hiding from everything. Martinez took a drink. I'd call that a good death, if there is such a thing. I'd call it a waste. Maybe. But it's the waste that makes us fight harder, makes us remember why we started. He looked at her. Coleman didn't die for nothing, Evelyn. He died so his grandkids could grow up in a place that's fair. That matters. Evelyn wanted to believe that, needed to believe it. Music swelled from the center of town. Someone started singing, and others joined in. The celebration continued, people determined to find joy despite everything they'd lost. Come on, Martinez said, offering his hand. Let's dance, just for tonight. Let's pretend we won. We did win. Then act like it. Evelyn let him pull her into the crowd. They danced badly, both of them exhausted and injured and traumatized. But they danced anyway, because sometimes you had to claim victory even when it felt hollow. Because if you didn't, the people who died for it had died for nothing. And Evelyn refused to let that be true. The celebration lasted until dawn, but Evelyn left early. She walked through Red Hollow's quiet streets while music still echoed behind her, her boots stirring dust that glowed orange in the lamplight. The town looked different now, cleaner somehow, like Silas's absence had lifted a weight that had been pressing everything down for years. But different didn't mean healed. Scars remained, burned buildings, empty storefronts, the boarding house that was still just charred timber and ash. Rebuilding would take time, maybe years. She found herself standing outside what used to be Silas Grady's general store. Someone had broken the windows during the riots, and the door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside was ransacked chaos, shelves overturned, goods scattered, the ledger stand where Silas used to calculate how much people owed him smashed to pieces. This was where it started, where she'd stood with an empty basket and listened to a cruel man tell her she wasn't worth helping. Felt like a lifetime ago. Thought I'd find you here. Evelyn turned. Cade stood a few yards away, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd also left the celebration early. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Never can after things like this. He walked closer, studying the ruined store. You thinking about that first night? How'd you know? Because I think about the first time someone helped me every time something big happens. Like maybe if I remember it enough, I'll understand why. Evelyn looked at him. Did you ever figure it out? No, but I stopped needing to. Cade kicked at a piece of broken glass. Some things don't have reasons, they just are. Someone helped you because you needed help. You helped build all this because people needed something better. That's enough. Doesn't feel like enough. Not after everything it cost. It never does. His voice was quiet. That's how you know it mattered. They stood in silence for a while, 2 people who'd accidentally started a revolution neither of them had wanted. What happens now? Evelyn asked eventually. You keep building. Territory Council meets next week to finalize the cooperative charter. Trading markets scheduled to expand in the spring. You've got a dozen ranches waiting for your help organizing their operations. I meant what happens to you. Cade looked away. Same thing that always happens. I help where I can, then move on. You're leaving. Eventually, this was never my fight to finish. It's yours. The words shouldn't have hurt, but they did. Somewhere along the way, Evelyn had started counting on Cade being around, started thinking of him as something permanent in a life that had been nothing but temporary for too long. When? She asked. Not yet. Few more months, maybe. Want to make sure things are stable first. He glanced at her. Why? You going to miss me? Yeah. No point lying. You saved my life, Cade, more than once. I don't know how to. Then don't. He cut her off gently. I didn't do it for gratitude. Did it because someone needed to, and I was there. That's not nothing. Never said it was. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to talking about feelings. Look, you're going to be fine without me. Better than fine. You're strong, smart, and people trust you. That's rare out here. I'm terrified every single day. Good. Means you understand the stakes. Kate almost smiled. Fear's not weakness, Evelyn. It's what keeps you honest. The day you stop being scared is the day you start becoming someone like Silas. They walked back toward Iron Ridge together as the sun started painting the eastern sky, pink and gold. The ranch was quiet when they arrived, most people still sleeping off the celebration. Evelyn stopped at the barn. Thank you for everything. You already said that. I know, but I needed to say it again. Cade looked like he wanted to argue, then just nodded. Get some rest. Tomorrow starts early. He was right about that. The next few weeks blurred together in a chaos of organization and growth. The Territory Council held daily meetings, hammering out the details of the cooperative structure. Arguments erupted constantly: how to price goods fairly, how to distribute profits, how to prevent anyone from accumulating too much power. Every decision felt monumental because every decision set precedent. Evelyn found herself at the center of most discussions, whether she wanted to be or not. People looked to her for answers she didn't have, for wisdom she'd never claimed to possess. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and somehow she kept showing up anyway. Marcus Webb proved invaluable during those early weeks. The feed store owner had kept meticulous records of Silas's operation, and he used that knowledge to help build something better. He taught Evelyn how supply chains actually worked, how to negotiate with distant merchants, how to spot someone trying to cheat the system. You're a natural at this, he told her one afternoon as they reviewed inventory projections. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's what makes you good at it. You ask questions instead of pretending you know everything. Marcus adjusted his spectacles. Silas never asked questions, just assumed he was smarter than everyone else. That arrogance is what brought him down. I don't feel smart. I feel like I'm drowning. Welcome to leadership. Marcus's smile was sympathetic. The drowning feeling never completely goes away. You just get better at swimming. The trading market formalized quickly. What had started as a desperate attempt to undermine Silas's monopoly evolved into a sophisticated system of exchange. They established regular market days, twice weekly to start, with plans to expand. Rules were simple but firm. Fair pricing, honest dealing, no monopolies allowed. Anyone caught cheating got banned permanently. Word spread fast. Families started arriving from territories hundreds of miles away, bringing goods to trade and stories of their own struggles against local tyrants. They looked at what Red Hollow had built with a mixture of awe and hunger, like they were seeing proof that another way was possible, and they wanted to know how to replicate it. Evelyn found herself explaining the cooperative model to stranger after stranger, how they'd organized, how they'd protected themselves, how they'd turned individual weakness into collective strength. She'd tell the story until her voice went hoarse, and still people wanted to hear more. You're becoming famous, Rodriguez told her one evening. People are calling you the woman who broke Silas Grady. I didn't break him. We all did. Yeah, but you're the face of it, the symbol. He leaned against the porch railing. How's that feel? Uncomfortable. I'm not a symbol. I'm just someone who got tired of being hungry. That's exactly what makes you a good symbol. You're real. Rodriguez looked out at the darkening horizon. People don't need perfect heroes. They need proof that ordinary folks can fight back and win. But winning, Evelyn was learning, came with complications nobody talked about. The first major challenge arrived 3 weeks after Silas's capture. A merchant caravan from Santa Fe rolled into Red Hollow with a proposal. They wanted exclusive rights to supply the cooperative in exchange for discounted prices. On the surface, it seemed like a good deal, but Evelyn recognized the trap immediately. No, she said flatly when they presented it to the council. The lead merchant, a smooth-talking man named Cortez, raised an eyebrow. You're refusing a discount. I'm refusing to recreate the same monopoly we just destroyed. You get exclusive rights. You control our supply chain. Then you jack up prices once we're dependent on you. That's quite an assumption. It's how Silas started, too. small deals that seemed beneficial until suddenly we couldn't do business with anyone else. Evelyn looked around the council table. We don't trade freedom for convenience. Not ever. The council voted with her unanimously. Cortez left angry, muttering about short-sighted frontierspeople who didn't understand modern commerce. But 2 weeks later, he came back with a different offer: non-exclusive supply rights at competitive prices. No special treatment, just honest business. Evelyn accepted. You made an enemy there, Warren warned after the meeting. Better an enemy than a new master. Fair point, but the incident rattled her, because it proved that threats didn't always come with guns and fire. Sometimes they came dressed as opportunity, wearing friendly smiles and offering deals that sounded too good to refuse. Staying vigilant against obvious villains was easy. Staying vigilant against subtle exploitation was harder. The Territory Council formalized a month after the battle, with representatives from 8 major ranches and Red Hollow itself. They established bylaws, dispute resolution processes, and safeguards against corruption. Every decision required majority vote. No single person could override the collective will. It was messy and slow and argumentative, but it worked. Sarah Brennan became one of Evelyn's closest allies during those early months. The older rancher had decades of experience reading people and situations, and she wasn't afraid to call out bullshit when she saw it. You're being too soft on the Johnsons, she told Evelyn bluntly after one council meeting. They're pushing boundaries, seeing what they can get away with. They're struggling. I'm trying to help. Help? Yes. Enable? No. There's a difference. Sarah's voice was firm but not unkind. You can't save everyone, Evelyn. Some people will take advantage of your compassion if you let them. How do I know the difference? You watch and learn. See who actually tries versus who just wants handouts. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. You've got good instincts. Trust them. The advice proved valuable when the Johnsons tried to claim credit for improvements they hadn't made, angling for better resource allocation. Evelyn shut it down immediately, presenting records that showed their actual contribution versus what they claimed. They withdrew from the cooperative 2 weeks later, calling the whole thing a socialist experiment doomed to fail. Most people barely noticed they left. Winter settled over the territory with unusual harshness that year. Snow piled deep in the valleys, and temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid in troughs overnight. The cooperative faced its first real test as supplies ran low, and transportation became nearly impossible. Families started hoarding. Prices began to creep up. Fear threatened to unravel everything they'd built. Evelyn called an emergency council meeting on a night when the wind howled so loud it rattled the windows. Everyone looked tired and worried. This was the kind of crisis that could shatter trust irreparably. We need to redistribute supplies, she said. Families with surplus share with families running short. No profit, just survival. That's asking a lot, one of the ranchers said. People worked hard for what they have. And they'll work hard for nothing if we let this territory fracture. Evelyn's voice was steady. This is exactly what the cooperative was built for, collective survival when individual survival fails. And if people refuse to share, then we document it. And when things get better, we remember who stood together and who only looked out for themselves. The council debated for hours. Some wanted mandatory redistribution. Others argued for purely voluntary sharing. They finally settled on a middle ground, voluntary sharing with strong social pressure and public recognition for those who helped. It worked better than Evelyn expected. Families started showing up at the central distribution point with extra supplies. Not all of them, but enough. The cooperative published weekly lists of who contributed, and suddenly being on that list became a mark of honor. Being absent from it became shameful. Social pressure proved more effective than any law. The territory survived the winter intact, but the experience taught Evelyn something crucial. Systems only work if people believe in them. The moment that belief wavered, everything could collapse. Maintaining trust was harder than building it in the first place. Spring arrived like a gift, melting the snow and turning the valley green almost overnight. The trading market exploded with activity as people emerged from winter isolation, desperate to exchange goods and reconnect. Evelyn stood at the edge of the market on opening day, watching families trade and laugh and haggle good-naturedly. Children ran between stalls, musicians played fiddles. Someone was roasting meat over an open fire, and the smell made her stomach growl. This was what they'd fought for. This ordinary, beautiful chaos. Martinez appeared at her elbow with 2 cups of something that smelled strongly alcoholic. You look contemplative. Just thinking. About? About how 6 months ago I was starving in the street. Now I'm helping run a territory. She accepted the cup. Life's strange. Strange doesn't begin to cover it. Martinez took a drink. You hear the news from the Northern Territories? Which news? 3 different regions have established cooperatives based on our model. They're calling it the Red Hollow system. Evelyn nearly choked on her drink. They're what? Naming it after us. After you, really. Martinez grinned at her discomfort. You're famous, Mercer. Better get used to it. I don't want to be famous. Too late. The Northern Territories weren't the only ones watching. Over the next few months, representatives arrived from settlements across the frontier, some seeking advice, others just wanting to see if the stories were true. Could ordinary people really build something that worked? Could cooperation actually triumph over exploitation? Evelyn met with each group, explaining what they'd done and how. She tried to be honest about the difficulties, the setbacks, the costs, but she also showed them the results. Families thriving, children healthy, communities growing stronger. The idea spread like wildfire. By midsummer, 11 different territories had implemented some version of the cooperative model. Not all of them succeeded. Some failed spectacularly when local power brokers fought back harder than expected. Others collapsed from internal disputes and mismanagement. But enough succeeded to prove the concept worked. And that changed everything. Because once people saw that another way was possible, they stopped accepting the old way as inevitable. That was the real revolution. Not the battle or the dramatic confrontation with Silas Grady, but the quiet, persistent belief that things could be better, and the willingness to work for it even when the work was hard. Rodriguez found Evelyn one afternoon in her makeshift office, surrounded by correspondents from a dozen different territories, all asking for advice. You need help, he said flatly. I'm managing. You're drowning. There's a difference. He pulled up a chair. Warren and I have been talking. The cooperative needs to hire assistants, people dedicated to helping coordinate all this expansion. We can't afford that. Yes, we can. The market's generating surplus. We've got funds specifically allocated for administrative costs. Rodriguez leaned forward. You can't do this alone, Evelyn. Nobody can. He was right, though she hated admitting it. They hired 3 assistants over the following weeks. A young woman named Clara, who had a gift for organization, an older man named Thomas, who understood legal frameworks, and a former school teacher named Ellen, who could explain complex ideas in simple terms. The difference was immediate. Tasks that had consumed Evelyn's entire day got handled in hours. Correspondence that had piled up for weeks got answered promptly. The cooperative's administration transformed from chaotic scrambling to something approaching professional competence. I should have done this months ago, Evelyn admitted to Warren. Probably. But you had to learn you couldn't do everything yourself. Warren smiled. That's a hard lesson for people like you. People like me. People who spent too long surviving alone. You're so used to relying only on yourself that asking for help feels like weakness. The observation struck deeper than Evelyn expected. He was right. She'd spent so long with nobody to depend on that even now, surrounded by people willing to help, her instinct was to carry everything herself. How do I change that? She asked. One small step at a time. Let Clara handle scheduling. Let Thomas review legal documents. Let Ellen draft responses. Warren's voice was kind. Trust the people around you the way they trust you. It was harder than it sounded, but Evelyn tried. The cooperative's first anniversary arrived with surprisingly little fanfare. They marked it with a special market day and a community dinner, but mostly it felt like just another week of work, which was perhaps the best sign of success. That what had seemed revolutionary was now just how things were done. Evelyn stood up at the dinner to say a few words, feeling absurdly nervous despite having addressed crowds dozens of times by now. A year ago, she began, most of us were barely surviving. We were trapped by debt, controlled by fear, convinced that this was just how the frontier worked, that cruelty and exploitation were the price of living out here. She looked around at the assembled faces. But we were wrong. We proved we were wrong. We built something better, something based on cooperation instead of competition, on mutual support instead of individual ruthlessness. It hasn't been easy. We've lost people. made mistakes, faced challenges we didn't anticipate. There were moments I thought this whole experiment would collapse. But it didn't, because enough of you believed it was worth fighting for, worth the risk, worth the work. Her voice grew stronger. What we built here matters, not just for us, but for everyone watching. We proved that ordinary people can create extraordinary change, that you don't need wealth or power to build something meaningful. You just need courage and persistence and a willingness to try. So thank you, all of you, for taking that chance, for doing the hard work, for believing that we deserved better, and then making it real. The applause was deafening. After the dinner, Evelyn found herself cornered by a steady stream of well-wishers. People wanting to shake her hand, share their stories, express their gratitude. It was overwhelming in ways both good and uncomfortable. She finally escaped to the porch where Sarah sat smoking a pipe and watching the stars. Hiding? The older woman asked. Breathing. Fair enough. Sarah offered her the pipe. Evelyn declined. You did good in there. That speech meant something. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's what people need most. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Can I give you some advice? Always. Don't let this consume you. I've seen it happen. Good people who give everything to a cause until there's nothing left of themselves. They burn out or break down or just disappear one day. I'm not going to disappear. Maybe not. But you need to remember who you are outside of all this. The woman who survived because she was stubborn and strong. Don't lose her in the leader everyone expects you to be. The words settled over Evelyn like a weight. Because Sarah was right. She'd been so focused on building the cooperative, on proving it could work, that she'd barely thought about herself as a person separate from the role. When was the last time she'd just sat and watched the sunset? Or gone riding for pleasure instead of business? Or had a conversation that wasn't about logistics and planning? She couldn't remember. How do I balance it? She asked. You make time for yourself the same way you make time for everything else. You schedule it, protect it, treat it as essential instead of optional. Sarah's smile was knowing. Because if you burn out, this whole thing suffers. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's strategic. The next day, Evelyn blocked off one afternoon a week for herself. No meetings, no correspondence, no cooperative business, just time to exist as herself instead of Director Mercer. The first week, she spent it riding through the valley with Rodriguez, not talking much, just being. The second week, she helped at the school Ellen had started, reading to children and remembering what it felt like to do something simple and good. The third week, she did absolutely nothing except sit on her porch and watch clouds drift by. It felt strange at first, almost guilty. But gradually, she realized Sarah was right. Those stolen hours of being just Evelyn instead of Director Mercer made her better at everything else. She returned to work refreshed instead of exhausted, made clearer decisions, had more patience for difficult people. Taking care of herself helped her take care of everyone else. Summer brought its own challenges. A drought threatened crops, requiring the cooperative to organize massive irrigation projects. Families worked together digging channels, sharing water resources, creating systems to distribute the precious resource fairly. It was grueling work. But it got done because people understood they'd all suffer if they didn't help each other. That was the fundamental shift the cooperative had created. Not just new economic structures, but a new way of thinking about survival. The old frontier mentality had been everyone for themselves. Take what you can, trust nobody. The new way recognized that individual survival depended on collective thriving. When one family struggled, everyone helped because they knew they might be the ones struggling next time. It wasn't altruism exactly, more like enlightened self-interest. But the result was the same, people taking care of each other. In August, word arrived that Silas Grady had been sentenced. The trial in Santa Fe had taken months, but the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on multiple counts of arson, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder. He'd hang before winter. The news spread through Red Hollow quickly. Some people celebrated, others felt nothing. A few even felt sorry for him, though they kept that sentiment quiet. Evelyn felt mostly relief that it was over. Silas had represented an old way of doing things, where power and money mattered more than people. His execution closed that chapter definitively. The territory could move forward without constantly looking back, but the relief was complicated by something else. Because Silas's defeat hadn't solved everything. New challenges kept emerging. merchant cartels trying to manipulate prices, land speculators attempting to buy up territory, politicians from Santa Fe showing interest in regulating the cooperative, which everyone knew meant finding ways to tax or control it. The fight didn't end with one victory. It continued every day, in small battles and constant vigilance. That realization was both daunting and oddly reassuring, because it meant the cooperative wasn't a temporary experiment that would end once dramatic confrontations resolved. It was a permanent shift in how the territory operated, and permanent shifts required permanent commitment. In September, Cade returned. Evelyn was reviewing supply projections when Clara knocked on her office door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, smiling in a way that suggested she knew exactly who it was. Cade stood in the main hall, dusty from travel, looking exactly as he had when he left, maybe a little more weathered around the eyes. "You're back," Evelyn said, trying not to sound as relieved as she felt. "Temporarily. Heard things were going well. Wanted to see for myself." They walked through Red Hollow together, and Evelyn showed him everything that had changed. The new school, the expanded market, the irrigation system, the housing that had been built for families relocating to the territory. "This is incredible," Cade said quietly. "You did this in 4 months?" "We did this. The cooperative. Everyone working together. But you led it. I helped organize it. There's a difference." Cade stopped walking and looked at her directly. "You're too modest. This doesn't happen without you pushing it forward." "It doesn't happen without a lot of people pushing. I'm just the one everyone decided to listen to." They reached the edge of town where the valley opened up, golden grass rolling toward distant mountains. The view was beautiful in a way that made Evelyn's chest ache. "I miss this," Cade said. "The work I was doing out west, it mattered. But it didn't feel like this." "Feel like what?" "Like home." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning Evelyn wasn't sure how to interpret. "You staying?" she asked. "For a while. Figure the cooperative could use someone who knows how to handle trouble when it shows up. We've got Rodriguez and Martinez for that. They're good, but they're not me." He said it without arrogance, just stating fact. "And you could use someone watching your back who isn't caught up in daily operations." Evelyn wanted to argue that she didn't need protecting, but she'd learned enough about leadership to know that having someone you trusted completely was invaluable. "Okay," she said. "Stay." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Cade smiled, a real smile, not the half expressions he usually offered. "All right then." Having Cade around changed things in ways Evelyn hadn't anticipated. He didn't insert himself into cooperative operations or try to influence decisions, but his presence provided stability that she hadn't realized she needed. When merchants tried to intimidate her during negotiations, Cade's quiet looming in the background reminded them she wasn't defenseless. When drunk ranchers got rowdy at council meetings, he'd step in and calm things with a few quiet words. When Evelyn worked too late and forgot to eat, he'd show up with food and refuse to leave until she took a break. "You're hovering," she told him one evening. "I'm being helpful. You're being overprotective. Can it be both?" He set a plate of dinner in front of her. "Eat. You haven't had anything since breakfast." "How do you know that?" "Because I pay attention." Evelyn ate, mostly to prove she could take care of herself, but also because the food was good and she was hungrier than she'd realized. "Thank you," she said eventually. "For what?" "For coming back, for staying, for caring." Cade looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, as always. "You'd do the same for me." "Would I?" "You already have. Multiple times." He leaned back in his chair. "That first night when you could have refused to come with me, that took trust I didn't deserve yet. You gave it anyway." "I was desperate." "You were brave." His voice was firm. "There's a difference." They fell into a comfortable routine over the following weeks. Evelyn handled the daily operations of the cooperative while Cade dealt with security concerns and helped mediate particularly volatile disputes. They had dinner together most evenings, discussing challenges and victories, arguing about strategies. It felt natural in a way that surprised Evelyn, like pieces sliding into place. October brought the cooperative's biggest test yet. A consortium of wealthy landowners from Santa Fe proposed absorbing the Red Hollow model into a territorial governance structure they controlled. They presented it as modernization, professionalization, bringing frontier operations up to civilized standards. The council saw it for what it was, a takeover attempt. They want to control us, Sarah said bluntly during the emergency meeting. Package it however they like. This is about Santa Fe elites deciding they should run things instead of us. We can't fight the territorial government, one of the ranchers said nervously. They've got legal authority. Legal authority to govern, yes, not to dismantle systems we built ourselves. Evelyn looked around the table. The cooperative operates on public land with voluntary participation. They can't force us to join their structure. They can make our lives very difficult if we refuse. Then we prepare for difficult. Her voice was steel. We didn't survive Silas Grady just to hand control over to different tyrants wearing fancier suits. The council voted to refuse the proposal unanimously. The response from Santa Fe was swift and ugly. Tax collectors appeared demanding payments on vague charges. Inspectors showed up claiming to enforce regulations nobody had heard of. Suddenly, trading caravans faced delays and confiscations at territorial checkpoints. It was economic warfare designed to strangle the cooperative slowly. We need to fight back, Martinez said at a strategy meeting. How? Rodriguez challenged. We can't match their resources. We don't need to match them. We need to embarrass them. Evelyn had been thinking about this for days. They're claiming we're breaking laws and operating illegally, but we've kept meticulous records of everything we do. We publish those records, show everyone that we're following every regulation while they're inventing charges to harass us. Who's going to care about records? Other territories trying the cooperative model? Journalists, politicians in Santa Fe who don't like corruption. Evelyn leaned forward. We make this public and messy. Force them to either leave us alone or explain why they're attacking a successful legal operation that's helping people. Clara spoke up. I know a journalist in Santa Fe. Writes for the territorial newspaper. If we gave him evidence of harassment and our records showing compliance, he'd run with it, Ellen finished. Especially if we frame it as elites attacking ordinary people trying to survive. They spent 2 weeks preparing a comprehensive documentation package. Every trade recorded, every regulation followed, every attempt at harassment by territorial officials detailed with dates, names, and witnesses. Then they handed it to Clara's journalist friend. The article ran on the front page of the Santa Fe Territorial News 3 days later. It was devastating. The journalist didn't just report the facts. He turned it into a story about corrupt officials attacking honest frontier families who'd built something remarkable. He contrasted the cooperative's transparency with the territorial government's secretive harassment. He questioned why wealthy Santa Fe elites felt threatened by poor ranchers helping each other survive. Public opinion swung dramatically. Suddenly, politicians who'd supported the takeover found themselves facing angry constituents. The territorial governor, eyeing re-election, publicly distanced himself from the whole affair. The harassment stopped almost overnight. The cooperative had won again. But the victory was exhausting. Evelyn found herself in her office late one night, too tired to even go home. Kate appeared with coffee and sat down across from her. You all right? He asked. I'm tired, Kate. So tired. She rubbed her face. Every time we solve one problem, 3 more appear. It never stops. It's not supposed to stop. That's what running something means. I didn't sign up for this. Actually, you did. The moment you proposed the trading fair, you signed up for all of it. His voice was gentle. But that doesn't mean you have to do it forever. Evelyn looked up. What? You could step down, train someone else to take over, go back to ranching or whatever you want. And abandon everything we built? You wouldn't be abandoning it. You'd be trusting it to continue without you. Cade leaned forward. That's the real test of whether you built something lasting. Can it survive when you're gone? The question haunted Evelyn for weeks. Could the cooperative survive without her? Should it have to? What did she actually want for herself beyond this role everyone had pushed her into? She didn't have answers, but the questions themselves felt important. Winter returned, milder this year, but still challenging. The cooperative handled it smoothly. The systems they'd built during the previous year's crisis functioning exactly as designed. Supplies were distributed fairly. Families shared resources. Nobody went hungry. Evelyn watched it all work and felt a strange mixture of pride and melancholy. Pride because they'd actually done it, built something that functioned, that helped people, that proved cooperation was stronger than exploitation. Melancholy because watching it work without constant intervention meant she was less essential than she'd thought. Which should have felt good, but mostly just felt disorienting. Christmas came and went. The cooperative organized a community celebration that brought families from across the territory together. Music, food, gift exchanges, children playing in the snow. It was beautiful and warm and everything they'd fought to create. Evelyn stood at the edge of it all, watching. Cade appeared beside her, as he often did. "You're doing it again," he said. "Doing what?" "Standing apart, observing instead of participating. Someone needs to observe, make sure everything runs smoothly. Everything's running smoothly without you hovering." He offered his hand. "Come on, dance with me." "I don't dance." "Neither do I. We'll be terrible together." She let him pull her into the crowd. They were indeed terrible, stepping on each other's feet and completely ignoring the rhythm. But it didn't matter because everyone else was equally bad and nobody cared. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt herself relax. Just be present instead of constantly planning the next thing. Afterward, walking back through the quiet streets, Cade said, "You ever think about what comes next?" "Next?" "After all this, after the cooperative's established and running on its own." He glanced at her. "What do you want, Evelyn? For yourself, not for the territory." Nobody had asked her that in so long she'd almost forgotten the question existed. "I don't know," she admitted. "I spent so long just trying to survive that I never thought past that. Then the cooperative happened, and I've been so focused on building it that I haven't thought about what comes after. Maybe it's time to start thinking." They reached her office and stopped. "What about you?" Evelyn asked. "What do you want?" Cade was quiet for a long moment, then, "I want to stop running. Find some place that feels like home and actually stay." "You thinking Red Hollow might be that place?" "Maybe, if there's a reason to stay." He was looking at her when he said it. Evelyn's heart did something complicated in her chest. They'd danced around this for months, the unspoken thing growing between them, the way they gravitated toward each other, the trust that went deeper than friendship. "Cade, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted. "I just wanted you to know. When you figure out what you want, I'm hoping I might be part of it." He left before she could respond. Evelyn stood alone in the cold night air, her mind racing. What did she want? The answer came slowly, over days and weeks of thinking. She wanted the cooperative to succeed, yes, but she also wanted a life beyond it. Wanted relationships that weren't just professional. Wanted to build something personal, not just communal. Wanted to stop defining herself entirely by what she'd survived and start defining herself by what she chose. In February, the cooperative held its annual assessment. The numbers were extraordinary. Poverty had dropped 43%. New businesses had quadrupled. Child mortality was down. Education programs were expanding. The trading market drew merchants from across the entire territory now. By every measure, they were thriving. Sarah stood up during the council meeting. "I propose we formalize the leadership structure, create an official director position with defined term limits." "We already have that," someone said. "Evelyn's been serving as director." "Informally, yes, but we've never actually voted on it or established term limits. I'm proposing we make it official. 2-year terms, maximum of 3 consecutive terms, then mandatory break." The council discussed it at length, eventually agreeing. The structure would prevent anyone from accumulating too much power while still allowing for experienced leadership. Then they voted for the first official director of the Red Hollow Cooperative Territory. Evelyn won unanimously. Accepting the position felt different this time. Not like being conscripted, but like choosing it. She understood what it meant now, the work, the sacrifices, the constant challenges. And she chose it anyway. But with a caveat. "I accept," she told the council, "for 1 2-year term. After that, we train someone else to take over. This cooperative needs to prove it can transition leadership smoothly." "You planning to leave?" Warren asked. "I'm planning to have the option. There's a difference." The council agreed to her terms. That evening, Evelyn found Cade at the creek where they'd first talked months ago. "Heard you got officially promoted," he said. "I did." She sat beside him. 2 years, then I'm stepping back. "What'll you do after?" "I don't know yet." but I'm starting to think about it. She took a breath. And I'm thinking maybe I'd like to do it with you, if you're still interested in staying. Cade turned to look at her, surprise and something warmer in his eyes. I'm interested. I'm not easy to be around. I work too much. I'm stubborn. I carry guilt I probably shouldn't. I know. I've been around for most of it. And you still want this? I've wanted this since the night you agreed to come with me, despite every reason not to. His voice was rough. Been waiting for you to be ready. I'm ready. He kissed her then, gentle and certain, and Evelyn felt something in her chest unlock. Permission to want something for herself. Permission to build a life beyond survival. The next 2 years passed in a blur of work and growth and learning to balance leadership with living. The cooperative expanded to 17 territories, each one adapting the Red Hollow model to their local needs. Evelyn helped coordinate the network, sharing knowledge and resources across regions. But she also made time for herself, for riding with Cade through the valley, for quiet evenings reading, for friendships with Clara and Ellen and the growing community around her. She learned that taking care of herself made her better at taking care of everything else. Learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. Learned that leadership wasn't about being perfect, but about being persistent. As her term neared its end, the council began preparing for transition. They'd identified 3 strong candidates to run for director, all of them capable and committed to the cooperative's values. Evelyn felt surprisingly at peace about stepping down. She'd done what she set out to do, prove the cooperative could work. Now it was time to prove it could continue without her. On her last day as director, the territory threw a celebration that dwarfed anything that had come before. Hundreds of people showed up to thank her, share stories, express their gratitude. It was overwhelming and beautiful, and Evelyn spent half of it crying. When she finally gave her farewell speech, she kept it simple. 2 years ago, I stood in front of you terrified and uncertain. I'm leaving this position the same way. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But that's okay, because fear and uncertainty mean we're still growing, still pushing boundaries, still refusing to accept that this is as good as it gets. What we built here started with one simple act of kindness. Someone helping a stranger because it was the right thing to do. That kindness rippled outward until it transformed an entire territory. That's the real lesson. Not that we need perfect leaders or brilliant strategies, but that we need to care for each other, to refuse to accept cruelty as normal, to believe that ordinary people working together can create extraordinary change. So thank you, all of you, for proving that compassion isn't weakness, that cooperation isn't naive, that building something better is always worth the cost. Keep fighting, keep building, keep caring. And never forget that every revolution starts with someone saying, "Come with me," to a stranger who needs help. The applause was deafening. 3 months later, Evelyn and Cade stood outside a newly built cabin on the edge of the valley. It was small and simple in theirs, a place to call home after years of temporary lodgings and borrowed spaces. "Think you'll miss it?" Cade asked, meaning the cooperative. "Probably, but I'll also be there, just in a different role." Evelyn leaned against him. "Ellen's going to be a great director, maybe better than me." "Doubt that, but she'll be good in her own way." They stood watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and orange. Somewhere in the distance, the trading market was wrapping up another successful day. Families were heading home. Children were playing in streets that had once been empty and dangerous. The territory was thriving, and Evelyn had helped make that possible. But now it was time to let go, to trust that what they'd built was strong enough to stand without her constant vigilance, to finally, after years of fighting and struggling and barely surviving, just live. "You know what I realized?" she said quietly. "What?" "That night when you helped me, you didn't just save my life, you showed me what I was capable of becoming." She turned to face him. "I spent so long thinking I was weak because I needed help, but needing help is what made me strong. It taught me that survival isn't about standing alone. It's about building connections." "That's what the cooperative is. That's what everything is, or should be." Evelyn smiled. "We're all just trying to survive. The question is whether we do it alone or together. Together's harder. Together's better." Cade pulled her close. "Yeah, it is." They stood there as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The stars were starting to emerge, brilliant and cold and infinite. Somewhere in Red Hollow, the new director was probably working late, wrestling with challenges and decisions and the weight of responsibility. Evelyn sent her a silent wish of strength and patience, because that's what leadership required. Not perfection, just the stubborn refusal to give up, even when giving up seemed easier. The willingness to keep trying, keep building, keep believing that tomorrow could be better than today, and the courage to accept help along the way. Evelyn had learned those lessons the hard way, carved into her bones through starvation and humiliation and battles that still gave her nightmares. But she'd learned them, and in learning them, she'd helped transform a territory, helped prove that cruelty didn't have to win, that ordinary people could create extraordinary change, that one act of kindness could ripple outward until it reshaped the world. She thought about the woman she'd been, broken and desperate, standing with an empty basket outside a store while everyone turned away. That woman felt like someone else now, someone distant and small and impossibly brave for simply refusing to give up. Evelyn owed her everything, owed that stubborn, starving woman for surviving long enough to become who she was now. "Thank you," she whispered to the ghost of her past self, "for not giving up, for accepting help, for believing life could be better." The wind carried her words away across the valley where families slept safe and fed and hopeful, where children dreamed of futures that didn't involve just surviving but actually thriving, where a revolution built on compassion continued every single day. And Evelyn Mercer, former nobody, former director, current human being learning how to live instead of just survive, walked hand in hand with Cade Callahan into the cabin they'd built together, ready for whatever came next, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but believing finally that it would be worth it, because everything worth having always was.